Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I was reading the news this week. I'm a news junkie. And maybe some of you saw this article about the 3-year-old girl who was born without feet. Well, there also happened to be a dog breeder who raised special needs dogs, or aid dogs for the blind and the needy. One of his dogs had recently given birth to a pup who was born without a paw. The breeder and his wife debated whether or not to have the dog put down. But then they decided against it, decided they would find the dog a good home. And they named the dog Lieutenant Dan, after the character in Forrest Gump, who had lost his legs in the war. Then the breeder and his wife read about this 3-year-old girl born without feet, and they decided to give Lieutenant Dan to the girl, knowing that the two of them would develop a special bond, because the best friends are those friends who make you feel like you're not alone. The best friends are those friends who make you know that you are not alone. Well, as you've already heard, today is Good Shepherd Sunday. Whenever you hear the gospel about the shepherd who lays down his life, and you hear the words, "I know my sheep and my sheep know me," you can be pretty sure it's Good Shepherd Sunday. As we hear in the gospel that Christ is the Good Shepherd, who calls each of us by name and knows all of our troubles, all of our struggles. The shepherd who knows us and lets us know that we are not alone. The church also chooses today to celebrate our priests and pastors, like Father Steve and Father John, who are our good shepherds, and who, even in a parish as large as ours, seem to know most of us by name. Quite an amazing feat, isn't it? And they make us feel like we are not alone. So thank you, Father Steve, and thank you, Father John. And that is why the church has also decided to make today National Prayer for Vocations for Priest Day. So it's National Day of Prayer for Vocations. Now, I know there has to be a few of you out there who may have considered a vocation to the priesthood, or even went to the seminary for a few years before deciding that it wasn't for you, and that you were called to another vocation. My father, for example, spent 2 years at the old St. Mary's Seminary in Baltimore during World War II. But he told me that he would look down from on top of the hill into the harbor and see all the Navy ships going off to war. And he felt called to go and to serve his country. He was going to return to seminary after the war, but then he met my mom and felt called to serve in another way, as a husband and father. He made the Navy a career and stayed for 3 tours. But after the Korean War, decided to change careers and went to work for IBM as a service engineer, repairing computers. He was really good at what he did. And I remember during the mid to late 60s, he spent a lot of his spare time on the weekends fixing televisions for the neighbors. He would walk down the street, and sometimes I would go with him. We'd walk into the house. We'd play around with the TV, fidget with it, get an idea of what might be broken. Then the two of us would pull that huge console TV away from the wall, take off the back, and he'd take out all the tubes, and I'd take notes as to where everything went, Then we would drive about 8 miles to the electronics store and then test all the tubes, right? Remember those days? Some of you do, I know, yeah. And then we'd go back and we'd put the faulty tube in and see if it worked. And if it didn't work, we'd scratch our heads, get the toolkit out, and maybe get the soldering iron out and have to replace a capacitor or something, My dad had a 35-year career at IBM. But his vocation was that call to serve, to help others, using the gifts that he was given. and being a good neighbor, as good neighbors, like good friends, are those people who let you know that you are not alone. Funny thing, I too spent 2 years in seminary, but I got out one weekend and I got kissed. I think she's over there somewhere. Where is she? She's right there. And I realized that priesthood wasn't for me, as I found out I like girls way too much. That wasn't going to work. But then I had an 18-year career as a butcher and store manager, and another 25-year career as auditor and accountant. But my vocation, like my dad's, was to serve. My vocation was always to serve. As a butcher, I waited on people behind the counter and, selected their cuts of meats, told them how to cook that leg of lamb or prime rib or turkey that they bought, helped them with ideas for dinner. I was serving people. As an auditor, I traveled the country. I oversaw 138 operations in 42 states, and in many cases, I was the only person from the corporate office that many of these people had ever seen or ever met. And I discovered that my role was to bring their needs back to the big corporate office, to be the voice of the people. Once again, my vocation was to serve. As you know, we all have vocations. Every one of you here has a vocation and a career. You also have careers, whether it be as a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, a salesperson, engineer, technician, a baker, a hairdresser, or just mom. But we're all called to use those gifts that we are given to serve and to help others, to make those who are in need, those we serve, know that they are not alone. At the last Mass, we had a lot of kids at the last Mass. I was watching the parents, and there was one mom over here just rocking her baby. Oh my gosh, it was so precious to watch. So much love, so much caring, That baby knows that baby is not alone, We're all called to serve and to help others in similar ways. Back in 2000, Cindy and I started on our master's in pastoral ministry at Spalding. The goal of one of our classes was to develop a personal mission statement. Our assignments were to read various books on values and priorities, and then pray and reflect on those. And each week we were to rewrite or update our personal mission statement. And after 18 weeks and 18 revisions, my mission statement had been condensed from this many, a huge paragraph down to 2 words: to serve. A deacon who was in our class heard my presentation and said, "You are going to be a deacon." And I said, "No way." But 2 hours later, we were down at the Archdiocesan office filling out the paperwork. Several years later, I saw that same call to serve in Deacon Derek when he and Miss Deanna got up here and gave a witness talk. I chased him down afterwards, and I said, "You are going to be a deacon." And he is. I see that same call to serve in quite a few of you out there. And if Derek or I approach you and say, "You're going to be a deacon," or if someone else, even your spouse, your wife says, "You make a good deacon," give it some serious thought. Don't be afraid. It's not going to hurt. Granted, we're all not called to be deacons, but the bottom line is that we are all called to serve. And if Father John or Father Steve or anyone else who sees that call to service in you approaches you and asks you to consider the priesthood or religious life, or if you felt that call yourself. I know two young girls in our parish considering religious life, If you felt that call yourself, don't brush it off. Give it some serious thought, because the church needs good leaders. It needs good shepherds who can walk with their flock, call them by name, and make them know that they are not alone. And regardless of our call, it's never too late to put that call into action. In the end, however, it is Christ who is the ultimate good shepherd, the one who calls his sheep. The question for us, yes, the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we good sheep who listen to the shepherd's call? Are we good sheep who follow the shepherd's call to serve using those gifts that we've been given? God bless.